Greetings. Welcome, everyone. It's good to be together for this panel. I'm Father Bob Dowd, Assistant Provost for Internationalization at the University of Notre Dame. And it's great to be together with leaders from Catholic institutions of higher education devoted in a special way to meeting the needs of immigrants and refugees. So we're really pleased to welcome you all to this panel on the role of Catholic colleges and universities and their attempts to meet the challenges of the day with regard to meeting the needs of immigrants. I'm going to introduce our panelists and then I'm going to turn to them with a big broad question and get this conversation off to a start. I welcome you all to submit questions via the Q&A feature, and please feel free to do that throughout the conversation. And then towards the end of the conversation, maybe 40 minutes into the conversation that I have with them, we'll turn to the questions that you've submitted. Like I said, we have 4 distinguished leaders from Catholic institutions of higher education. And the first is Donna Carroll. Donna is in her 27th year as president of Dominican University, a comprehensive Catholic university of 3,600 students located 10 miles west of Chicago. She's the first lay president of that institution, which was founded in 1901 by the Sinsinawa Dominican Sisters. In 1997, she led the academic community through a successful name change from Rosary College to Dominican University. She has truly been a champion of immigration reform and rights of the undocumented. And she's received numerous awards, including the Strangers No Longer Award from the Archdiocese of Chicago, the Changemaker Award from Paso, and the Moral Courage Award from Faith in Public Life. So it's great to have Donna with us. We also have Maria Silva. Maria is the Director of Community Partnerships at the University of San Diego, and she is director there at the Mulvaney Center and co-chair for the Immigration Task Force at the University of San Diego. Maria moved to San Diego from Mexico in 2008 to pursue a bachelor's degree from that institution. And as an immigrant and border child herself, Maria cares deeply about immigrant communities on both sides of the border. And she works diligently to create an inclusive environment for DACA and undocumented students and their families on the campus. Her work with immigrant communities spans beyond campus to partnerships with community-based organizations in Tijuana and in San Diego. Maria, it's great to have you with us. We also have Don Taylor. Don is the 8th president of Cabrini University and transitioned Cabrini from a college to a university in 2016. He's really devoted himself to being mission-driven and entrepreneurial, and has really developed a very impressive roadmap to growth, and also developed what's called the Cabrini Promise. And this became the strategic plan for Cabrini in 2020. To create educational pathways, that's one of the big goals and objectives that Don has for students to attend Cabrini from various backgrounds. He's expanded undergraduate and graduate degree programs, and he's focused on strategic initiatives to make Cabrini a Hispanic serving institution, and also has developed international partnerships, particularly with schools in South America. So Don, great to have you with us. And then finally, Father Peter Walsh. Peter's a great friend. For many years, we've been great friends. We first met when we were in formation in Holy Cross. So Peter has served as director of campus ministry at St. Edward's University in Austin, a Hispanic serving institution. Father Peter was born in Boston and graduated from Stonehill College in 1984 with a BA in English. He entered the Congregation of Holy Cross and professed vows in 1985. And after receiving an MDiv from the University of Notre Dame, an institution I've heard of before, he was ordained in 1989. So prior to coming to St. Edward's, he was assistant chaplain at St. Thomas More Chapel and Center at Yale University. At St. Edward's, Father Peter helps support the university's camp students and is an ally to their DACA students. So Peter, great to have you with us, and great to have you all together. My first question would be, and maybe Donna can begin with this. It's a big, broad, general question. How are things looking with regard to immigrants at your institution and first generation student populations? How is it going at your institution? And what do you consider to be some of the greatest challenges that you face these days?
Sure. Well, I would answer that in one word: different. And let me talk a little bit about perspective as a way of beginning. As Bob mentioned, I've been doing this work for a long time, working with undocumented students, and Dominican became a Hispanic serving institution in 2011, and we declared sanctuary campus in 2016. So we have had a somewhat high profile role in this conversation. And I think we have to start with understanding how the perspective is changing. Right after the Supreme Court decision, one of our DACA leaders wrote an op-ed piece for the Chicago Defender. And he talked about how when his sister first got her DACA, he remembered that she said with real enthusiasm, "I feel like I exist." That identity issue was so important. Then you fast forward 8 years, to the threat of rescinding DACA, to the toxic political environment, to all the economic and health disparities. And Carlos, this young man, he reflected and said, "I realized that unlike my sister, I'm not looking to be humanized. I'm looking for justice." And I think it's important for all of us working with immigrants, and particularly with undocumented students, to realize that the narrative has changed, and to realize that what's going on now, especially for our civically engaged DACA students and others, is that everything's magnified. And the triggers are shorter, and the voices of students are louder, and that's not inappropriate, because it's a very threatening time. And the other factor that's changing, at least at Dominican, is that once upon a time, they were single issues. And now what I'm seeing is that, students talk about intersectionality, but we're seeing that no student wants to be recognized as a single dimension. I am an undocumented, or I am, this or that. They're really looking at integrating the different identities in their lives and allying together around those identities in a very different way. And I think we have to adjust our narrative and our services to their sense of integration. So as one example, one of the things that Dominican is doing right now, and our students, is we've established this new center, and the students named it. It's our Center for Cultural Liberation. And it's bringing together students across differences to really dialogue about their identity, and really to empower one another. And it's been exciting. It's been exciting to see, and they're also supporting one another. I mean, I think anybody working with undocumented students knows that their inability to participate in the CARES Act initiative recently was a very wounding and personal slight. And so that these types of gatherings help us have students helping each other And actually they came to me, and as a result, I went to the board, and we introduced something called the Trustees COVID Relief Fund, and we provided for all of our undocumented students as we would for any student who would have access to CARES Act. So I guess I start by saying we have to recalibrate our perspective, understand where students are right now, understand their advocacy for justice and their sense of intersectionality, and then build services from there. And that's what Dominican is trying to do at this point.
Well, thank you. And I think many of our participants may not have a sense of what the Dominican University student body looks like. Can you give us some sense of that before I move on to Maria?
Sure. We are about 2,200 undergrads, and I'll talk about the undergrads. We are a minority majority institution. We are about 50% Latinx, 50% first generation, 50% Pell eligible, largely regional, substantially commuting, and urban. We are slightly outside Chicago and draw a very urban activist, outspoken, very Dominican student body.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. Maria, how about the University of San Diego?
That was a great introduction from Donna, and one that's hard to follow up on. But I would say that we are very much at the University of San Diego experiencing the same in terms of intersectionality. So the historical fight for inclusion, for racial inclusion, and the way that's manifesting itself today in the current political atmosphere is very much connected, although it's being led by our Black community, is very much connected to our undocumented community. And those struggles are being framed in that way by our student body. So our the demands set forth by Black students and faculty and alumni at the University of San Diego included very bluntly a plea for inclusion of DACA and undocumented students. And so for our I guess social justice struggles to be aligned in this way so intentionally makes it a different moment to be a part of the fight in. So we're with you at the University of San Diego in that regard, certainly. And I would say the other piece that's different for us in addressing the needs of immigrants in San Diego in particular is that we're so close to the border. We're the closest Catholic university to the most heavily trafficked international border in the world. And so as an institution that thinks of itself and has a mission to be an anchor institution in the local community, for us, local includes Tijuana. We think of ourselves as a binational anchor institution. And so the way we our recruitment and enrollment efforts have to be considerate of a local community that includes Tijuana and that includes a significant amount of immigrant communities. Our services, our resources that we offer for both our students, but also for the local community are certainly geared at addressing the very specific needs of undocumented immigrants and of different kinds of immigrants. And so I would say our work is twofold, or I guess my role is twofold at the university. It's both creating an inclusive environment for DACA and undocumented families at the University of San Diego, but also extending those services to asylum seekers who have been stuck in Tijuana since March because there's no door to seeking asylum currently, to refugees who are currently in San Diego, to immigrants, women, children, unaccompanied minors, so to the broader sphere of immigrants off campus, as well as on campus.
Yeah, thank you. And the same question for you that I posed to Donna. I mean, what does your student body look like? What are the demographics at this point?
We're a little bit less diverse than Dominican, where our undergraduate population is about 5,000, and we're at about 20% Hispanic population. So we're making our way to becoming a Hispanic serving institution, and certainly have that goal, but we're not there yet. So a lot of the demands that I noted from our Black students, Black faculty, Black alumni, are around increasing our Black student population. Right now we're at 3%. The demand is to increase to 7%, just to name one example. But we're at about 50% white population currently.
Thank you. And some of our participants may not know what it means to be a Hispanic serving institution. So could you say a bit more about that? What does that mean, and what does that take?
Yeah, and I'm gonna lean on others who might already be Hispanic serving institutions to share more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can answer that question.
Yeah.
It's a federal designation,
Mm-hmm.
and it requires that you have 25% of your student body that is Latinx for 3 consecutive years.
Mm-hmm.
And it, you know, the designation is less important than the identity that you live into as a consequence. The designation gives you access to federal funding and a certain privilege when it comes to that environment. But the important question is, are you Hispanic enrolling, or are you really Hispanic serving?
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks, Maria. Don, we'll turn to you.
Sure, thanks, Father. So Cabrini is very similar to Dominican in Chicago. We're located about 20 minutes due west of Center City, Philadelphia. Undergraduate, about 1,600 students, largely residential campus, and we're roughly, like Donna said, about half of our students are students of color, Pell eligible, first generation, large number of immigrant undocumented DACA students. I mean, we really draw from the greater Del Val area. So the 100-mile swath of Southeast Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware. But then within the metropolitan Philadelphia area, about a third of our undergrad students come from kind of the northeast part of Philly, which is an incredibly rich, robust, heterogeneous Latinx community with a lot of college readiness success programs in there through various community alliance partners that Cabrini partners with. We have over 20 of those, a number of those feeder schools. And so we draw about a third of our students. And as Donna said, they come to us very much in the advocacy mode, right? And so, as Father Bobby alluded to, we migrated from college to university status in the 2015-16 year. And to coincide with that, with the Board of Trustees, we launched 4 academic centers for excellence. And so the one that I wanted to kind of highlight at this part is we're the only university or college in the Mid-Atlantic region that has a center for immigration. And so that center was actually the history, the DNA of the institution. So our founding is the Missionary Sisters of Sacred Heart of Jesus. That's St. Francis Xavier Cabrini's order, or we call her Mother Cabrini, and she was the patroness saint of immigrants. And so, you know, they're missionaries, the MSCs in 16 countries on 5 continents. We're the only university they sponsor, but there are about 20 other schools largely throughout Latin America. And so they're very much involved, and our university, our faculty, our staff, our students, our alumni are very much involved with the work that they do serving refugees and migrants and those that really are on the margins all over the world. And the sponsoring order gave a large 7-figure gift to endow the Center for Immigration. We're blessed. A former Cabrini valedictorian from many years ago who's an academic and also a practicing immigration attorney and is from that kind of cluster of where we get a lot of our students. Abel Rodriguez is our executive director for the Center for Immigration. And that's really a hub on campus that really provides kind of the catalyst for a lot of our marches, vigils, lobbying work at the state, federal level around DREAM Act, DACA, ending family detention. Bucks County, there's a major ICE detention center just maybe 30 miles north of here. We do a lot of lobbying and advocacy work around that. Lobbying for, driver's license for all, regardless of immigration status. The center, through Abel's prior life, works with a nonprofit legal entity within the city of Philly. And so we provide legal support to immigrants, faculty, staff, students, relatives, their representation. We also, this week in our Common Hour, every semester since we launched, Abel has had a program, Know Your Rights. And it's really focusing on providing training to the immigrant community around everything from financial literacy, constitutional rights, and encounters with law enforcement. There's a significant component that focuses on ICE and et cetera. So, I mean, the center is really, and we've continued to gain additional funding for that to provide stipends, other support of students who are undocumented, as you know, or DACA. They're not eligible for the financial aid. As Donna said, they got left out CARES. They're not eligible for other, and so we've tried to bring about additional funding sources or other streams through other nonprofits, alumni, et cetera, to support the work and really, have a number of students that are then working out of that center. And then we have partnerships with both middle schools and high schools in the region that are largely Latinx serving schools. And we go in, our Romance Languages faculty work with the Center for Immigration, go in, do programs with them. And so it's a really rich, I would say, to Donna's point, I think, and Maria as well, spot on, and I'm sure Father Peter will as well. They're very interesting times now. So COVID, racial injustice, everything else, the CARES Act, that has all are magnified on top of the other anxiety, and so certainly changes to the Supreme Court, the upcoming presidential election, our DACA and undocumented students have a lot of anxiety around that right now. And so there's, as Donna said, they're very vocal and they're very, and we live, our family at the President's house is on campus. And so we're there, we have them in our house, et cetera. But there've been lots of nights when we've been, with those students, as I'm sure Donna has as well, but midnight at night, when they think that there's a rumor that ICE is going to raid their area, and so it's just a lot of anxiety with our students right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Don. Peter, how are things?
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah,
it's great to see you all. And I'll give you the demographics so you won't have to ask. But St. Edward's University is in Austin, Texas. We're about 4 miles from the state capitol. And we've been here since 1885. And we're a Holy Cross institution, just like our sister school, Notre Dame. So St. Edward's has had a participation in the college assistant migrant program since 1972. So we were in on the beginning of that federal program that was part of President Johnson's anti-poverty campaign to support the children of migrant farm workers and migrant farm workers themselves to access college education. So we have about a 48-year experience of working with migrant communities and young people. And we've got over 2,000 alumni from that program. And it's been really wonderful how that program has helped us to to work with Latinx students and students from migrant and refugee families. We're a Hispanic serving institution. We're about 41 or 42% Latinx. We're also somewhere around 38 to 40% Pell eligible. So we work with a lot of first generation college students here. So in addition to the camp program, which has been very successful, and for those who don't know, it's a federal program that provides funds, but then the university also kicks in quite a bit to help scholarship students from migrant families, but also participating in it means that you need to have certain systems of support for the students so that they are successful. And so there's a dedicated counselor for them. There's a director and assistant director that run the program, as well as regular academic counseling to keep the students on track for graduation. So it's been, and like I said, we've learned a lot from it, not only in dealing with our Latinx students and students coming from a migrant background, but even with our Student Success Initiative. You know, we look to both the camp program and our participation in the McNair Scholars, which works with first generation college students, helping them to get into graduate school, to look at how we can support all of our students in their success. And so just a few years ago, we started a program with success coaches that meet that begin your freshman year and walk with you throughout the 4 or more years until graduation. Around the time that everybody's talking about the 2016 election cycle, when discourse about immigration became so heated, our students began a student organization called Monarchs on the Hilltop as an ally organization for DACA students. And Monarchs, of course, refers to the butterflies that cross over the border and make our fall so beautiful here in Austin. And supporting the Monarchs and understanding the experience of students who are DACA certified, especially after that came under threat, became a priority for me and for the Vice President for Student Affairs. And so we meet regularly with the Monarch leadership. We, thanks to both the Brothers and the Priests of Holy Cross, we created a fund in Catholic Charities to provide legal advice and also legal support for DACA renewal applications for as long as that's still going to be a possibility. But also to help support them because of the incredible stress that they're under with the uncertainty of where that program is going. I just want to talk about two also kind of pastoral challenges that we face. One is, and I'm sure this is familiar with a lot of the folks here, one is a kind of survivor guilt that our immigrant students, our children of immigrants face, Latinx students, because here they are in this wonderful college experience. A lot of it is funded through scholarships and other ways. And yet they're dealing with family members who are facing deportation or losing their jobs or have food inadequacy and insecurity. And it's hard to imagine just how difficult that is for them to be living in this environment and yet having family members who are living in a very different life. And to help them stick with it because they want to go back and help the family. But we also know from our camp program that college education is one of the best ways that a young person can help their families. The other thing is, like a lot of people, we're struggling with recruiting diverse faculty and staff, especially Latinx faculty and staff. The ones who are here have a heavier burden because they become the mentors and the role models for our Latinx students. And we got to open up that pipeline of Latinx folks with graduate degrees who can join the faculty and join the staff, because when you've got 40 or 50% Latinx and your faculty and staff is largely white, they have difficulty seeing themselves fully represented at the university that way. So I'll end with that. But it's wonderful working with these families and these students. But the challenges that we're facing right now can be very, well, anxiety producing, but also, you know, hopefully bring opportunities.
Mm-hmm. No, thanks, Peter.
Can I jump in, Bob, and
yeah,
just do a
do.
quick follow-up, because
Yeah.
I'm not surprised, but I think it's important to recognize how much everybody has been talking about family. And I think that this is a dynamic in working with Latinx students, and also particularly, as Peter was saying, with undocumented students in blended families with very complicated lives. And I think as higher educators, to some extent, it goes against what we're taught about in local parentis and all, you know, but it is a different framework, because and it does pull us, and Maria, you probably have more experience than the rest of us, it pulls us off campus into parishes, into family configurations, into the court system, in ways that are atypical of how we often work with other student groups. And it also, you learn very quickly that although we may be working with undocumented students, you can't isolate that. You know, you can't be part of a conversation if you're involved in immigration reform. You have to jump into the whole picture, because the families are so blended and complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I'll add to that. I don't want to generalize or stereotype or romanticize, but I can confidently say that a majority of the students that I work with on campus that are DACA or undocumented don't think from the I perspective, they think from the we perspective. It's family, it's a collective, it's my community, it's my neighborhood, it's my extended family. And so the shift from the higher ed perspective in addressing the needs of an entire collective there is a shift. It has to be different from our perspective as well. And another thing that Father Peter had touched on that I think needs to be highlighted is the weight on mental health that these decisions and these times have on our students and their families. The kinds of decisions that these students face, and one would argue, you know, any student has to choose between perhaps going to college or having a job, but having to choose between, is a career worth it, because I don't know if my DACA is going to survive, if my status is going to expire, if this is going to survive the next election. So should I be working and saving? Is that, you know, plus the fear of, I come from a mixed status family, my parents be deported soon, or my siblings, or just the weight of the emotional weight that a majority of DACA and undocumented students carry is tremendous. And the scope of the support and resources have to meet that need. And then the other piece you had mentioned as well was how faculty and staff reflect or don't reflect the cultures, the genders, the identities of these populations, and the barrier that creates, and how much more challenging it is for students to be motivated to complete their higher education career when they don't necessarily see themselves supported or reflected in the mentorship around them is real. And that's something that has also been demanded of us from Black, Indigenous, and students of colors, is to increase our diversity in our faculty and our staff.
And Bob, can I just add one word to Maria about that? And I'll be brief. It's a great point, but also the impact on faculty. You know, Father Peter talked about our students, our BIPOC students, our undocumented, they want to be able to see themselves in the classroom and student life and student services. But I mean, one of the things that in discussions with a lot of our faculty, as you said, as Father Peter said, you know, the faculty of color then take on these additional roles, right? And so you know, myself, my provost, I mean, we're hearing a lot from the deans, from our faculty about how they feel, in addition to the work that they're doing, and a lot of it now even online when we had to shift, but also that they feel like that, in their words, part of their job now as a faculty member in helping and assisting our students is really in the area of social work. I mean, the faculty talk about it, faculty brown bag lunches, about how they've now taken on that role, you know, and Donna was spot on saying it goes beyond your campus, right? You're out in the community, the families, the alliance partners, the parishes, and all of that. And our faculty and staff are so caring, and many of them, as I know yours do as well, give out their cell phone numbers. And so the students, in times of anxiety or something happens to their family, their call. And so I'm sensing there's like almost like a burnout factor on top of everything else, and just the mental health strain of the students, but also it's a strain on our faculty and staff as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, your institutions are all remarkable for the way they serve underserved populations. How do you make a go of it financially? I mean, if you could say a bit about that. I know there must be challenges, and particularly, I know, Don, you mentioned COVID, and I don't know if that's presenting financial challenges to your institutions as well. I would imagine it is. I know it's presenting challenges for us. Could you say a bit about how you make a go of it at your institutions financially, given your mission, your extremely important mission, but a mission that requires resources?
Well, I'll say to begin that you don't go into it lightly, because for many of our students, and DACA is a perfect example of it, they felt abandoned again and again. You know, windows open, they've been given a little money, they start to do something, and then the institution reverses or the likes. So that if in fact you are committing to supporting undocumented students, and about 10% of Dominican's undergraduate student body is undocumented, and our average financial package, our tuition is about $34,000. Our average financial package for an undocumented student is somewhere between $26,000 and $29,000 a student. So it is a particular philanthropic priority for me. And we've also found that we have some very good partners. We have a wonderful relationship with the Dream.us. And I suspect others do. But we make it a priority. And as a consequence, we invest a lot of money in it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Don. Anyone else want to tackle that question?
Just to piggyback on Donna, again, I think it's a major philanthropic consideration for us. But I mean, we had already started in preparing a next strategic plan, doing really an academic and administrative efficiencies analysis, cost of ed study, doing a reorganization, because we can't be all things to everyone anymore, right? And so you have to identify, I think even more so now, what are your top 2 or 3 priorities? And if you're really gonna be in this, are you in it for the long game? And because like in the greater Philly area, there are no comprehensive universities that are Hispanic serving institution, HSIs. We're on the trajectory to be the first. But as Donna said, that creates an additional financial challenges to your institution. And we don't even have time to get into the financial challenges of COVID, right, and everything else. But it's just, you have to say, okay, through kind of an inclusive planning process and an institutional effectiveness program, these are the things that we're no longer going to do. We got to give those away. And then part of then the resources come by reallocating resources, if it's truly one of your top priorities. If not, financially, it's going to be a hard time for it to work for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Same for us. Challenge is an understatement. We're constantly in fundraising mode, constantly thinking of creative ways to make tuition feasible, to make fees feasible for our students. And then the other piece, so one piece is in how we're able to address financial gaps for them and sustain that throughout their careers. And then the other piece goes back to, from a capacity standpoint for faculty and staff who are doing this work. We also, at USD, we don't have a Dreamer Center or a Center for Undocumented Students. We don't even have a specific role that is working on this full time. We have taken this on, a colleague of mine and myself have taken this on kind of in addition to our jobs. So back to what you were saying, Donald, on the tax on staff of color as well, right? So we are passionate about this work, and this is where I get most of my energy from in the work that I do on campus, but it's not my title, it's not my job, it's something I do kind of on the side. And so from that standpoint of having adequate capacity to staff this work, there's financial taxes as well. So both in supporting our students, but also in supporting the staff that support the students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of other institutions, we're a tuition dependent institution. And so COVID obviously has been a hit, and you know, you have to be very careful and responsible with planning the budget and reallocating resources according to mission. I think that's really a key part of it is, you know, this is serving this community is so much a part of our Holy Cross mission here at St. Edward's that, and it's something that gets very reflected with the camp students. The other part that I want to highlight is the importance of having emergency funds. You know, we're not talking about the thousands and thousands of dollars that will keep a student in college. Usually it's just $500 to pay the rent or to help with a utility bill. And our alumni have been really generous. So when our DACA students were ineligible for CARES funds, we created a special emergency fund. Well, not a special one, but we highlighted the emergency fund and got some really great resources from our alumni so that our DACA students could access those funds as well, instead of the CARES funds. So having ways of helping students negotiate, not the big picture of the economic plan for their college education, but the minor crises is very, very important.
Thank you. We have an election 32 days away. What concerns you about that election? I mean, what are your concerns about the impact that it might have on your institution? I'll open that for anyone.
Well, you know, I think, you know, ultimately when you talk about the challenge of the future, you know, the most immediate one is getting all of our students out to vote, so those students who aren't able to vote will someday have the chance to vote. I mean, that is the short-term bottom line. I don't want to, depending upon the way the election goes, we are prepared to absorb a lot of disappointment and anger that needs to be reconciled with students, or a sense of relief, and then we need to repair feelings and repair losses and move on to a next generation of planning and advocacy. But it will be, I think for immigration, it will be a historic turning point.
Anyone else want to comment on the upcoming election and its potential impact?
Donna summarized it spot on for us as well. you know, just really trying to get out the vote. And there's just, again, we're going to be dealing with just the potential, could be a lot of anxiety, a lot of upheaval. So again, I think Donna summarized it well. We're exactly in the same spot.
Mm-hmm. Peter, you were going to say something?
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is that, you know, there's what happens on our individual campuses in terms of being allies to students who are triggered, for lack of a better term, by certain political events, and the need to, you know, have a quick turnaround to issue statements and to hold sessions and to have a prayer vigil. We've been learning to get better at that on our campus. But the other part of it is the network of Catholic colleges and universities and their potential in continuing to lobby and to uphold Catholic values within, especially concerning immigration and refugee status, and how we've been falling down as a country with that. And you know, we've got some real heavy hitter Catholic colleges and universities within the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, and seeing a common effort to promote Catholic social teaching and having that voice in our national political discourse, I think can be extremely helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Maria, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, yes to everything that was already said, and honestly, everything about the election worries us. So trying to be as proactive as possible about supporting our students through what already is some of the most anxious times in their lives, supporting them in their own advocacy efforts and activist efforts. Our DACA students are leading a Get Out the Vote campaign for their peers currently, and so supporting those efforts and being mindful that for us in the border region, whatever happens post-November, the makeup of our communities here, and much like anywhere else, but our economies are, you know, are who's able to go back and forth between Tijuana and here will be heavily impacted by whatever happens November 3rd. And so just praying and being as proactive as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So we have a few questions, and I think, you know, just a reminder to everyone participating in this panel, our audience, to submit questions if you have them using the Q&A feature. We've got a few here. First one, before I forget, because it's a pretty simple and quick one. Donna, the name of the cultural center that you mentioned early on at Dominican, what is the name of that cultural center?
It's Center for Cultural Liberation.
Yeah, Center for Cultural Liberation.
And I can tell you that Dominican has been working fairly closely with Gina Garcia. Many of you probably know Gina. She's written one of the current practice books on Hispanic serving institutions. And it's not only perspective is changing, but language is changing too. And the sense of how you look at what we're now calling liberatory outcomes, you know, what I call in my age and generation equity outcomes, that and this is a center that really focuses on the integration of different cultures around a series of metrics, and it's very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. That's great. Sounds fabulous. Another question is, to your knowledge, have Latinx students been a historical presence at your institutions? You know, from the time of their founding or early on in the institution's history, or are they relatively recent, like 1970s and onwards? Depending on your answer to this question, have the presence of Latinx students impacted institutional mission in any concrete and visible ways?
Definitely. I'll say for us at the University of San Diego, Latinx presence to the extent that it's present now is new. Certainly new. It wasn't there from our founding, and it has shifted our mission, our values, our resource allocation in significant ways. The work that we do, our Undocumented Student Support Network, is just one example of how Latinx presence on campus has encouraged and pushed us to do things differently, to think differently. Our support network started in 2017, much as a response to the political moment, but also as a response to our Latinx students. There's more and more of a demand now as well for a Latinx center on campus, which we don't currently have, as well as for a full-on undocumented student support network. So we owe a lot of this work and a lot of the resources our university currently shares to the activism of our Latinx students.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I would say our immigrant student body and support for it is longstanding. Our mission is rooted in service to immigrant students. The complexion of our students has changed over time and reflects the changing demographic of Chicago and sectors of Chicago. So it has been, and again, I have 27 years of perspective on this at Dominican. It's probably been in the last 15 years that we have seen the growth in our Latinx students. And it has been our single largest growing population. And so it has surely changed how we understand and approach language on our campus. That we have a much stronger and more visible respect for bilingual culture. We do all of our admissions programs in 2 languages. We do parent programming in Spanish and English. We translate all of our major programs. So we are much more sensitive to culture and language than we have ever been. In part, back to our earlier conversation, it's not necessarily that our student is struggling with language, but his family needs a bilingual culture in order to be part of the academic community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Father, I would say very similar to what Donna said, in partnership with a number of our community alliance partners for college readiness. We go out in the community and we do bilingual FAFSA sessions for financial plan. A whole variety of things related to that. It's always been a part of, I think, the culture and mission of the institution. Being the only college or university, I think it's, in my experience, having traveled all throughout Latin America and South America, where we have Cabrini K-12 schools, it's just ingrained there. But to Donna's point here, it really, I think, in the last decade, as there were changes in different ethnic groups, geographic regions of Philly, and because we have made it a priority, then we've had to do a lot more programming and support services around intercultural education, the way Donna was saying. And really, we have a group that works with the president and the chaplain for Mission Academy work. And that group was just sharing with me that, that as a consequence of us striving to be an HSI, they've really tried to embrace diversity, equity, inclusion work in the interculture, really that it's grounded in the mission of the institution and approaching it that way. And again, it goes back to the resource allocation as well. You know, it's linked to our mission, so therefore it has to be a priority from the funding standpoint to make all those things happen.
Yeah.
I think this is also an opportunity to talk about just how complex that simple Latinx identity really is. So at St. Edward's, and I've looked through old yearbooks because I'm a geek and I like to do that. And there were, you know, Latinx names going back to the 20s, but they were mostly students coming from pretty well-established families in Mexico and throughout Latin America. And we continue to recruit, especially in Central America right now. A good proportion of our Latinx community comes from, you know, families of means in Central America. And it creates, you know, a tension with the children of migrants and the children of immigrants because of the different economic statuses that are within that identity, but the shared language and the shared, you know, commitment to certain values. But I think it's, and I don't know when St. Edward's became a Hispanic serving institution. It certainly was well before I got here 8 years ago. But again, I keep pointing to our camp program and how that has really helped, you know, change the nature or the campus and the way we go about doing things. But also it's a real, it articulates our mission in a very particular way that's visible, that helps us then to apply our mission and values throughout the university. So by focusing on this one community that deals with, you know, the children of migrant farm workers, it has a way of clarifying our mission values for other communities on our campus.
Great, thank you.
Peter, I think you bring up a really interesting point because we have someone sitting in San Diego, someone sitting in Texas, and someone sitting in, and we all have different populations of students and families that have different identity issues and perspectives. You know, we have been blessed with several major grants that are allowing us to develop a network of institutions. You are all part of them, I think, that will help us talk through ministry in a cultural context. And we did a year of visiting, you know, discussion groups, I think at St. Ed's. I know San Diego supported one. And that is the first thing that we discovered, that we should not assume each other's experience with students in this dimension, because geography plays a very significant role in culture, in history, in, you know, in family of origin, in ways that are in fact very complex and you know, and need to be parsed out and fully understood before we would attempt to try to express an expertise.
But something beyond the Latinx experience, the complexity of ethnicities within our broader undocumented student population is something that students have called us out on, you know, the language piece that you were mentioning, Donna, how many of our materials and web pages are translated to Spanish, and that is great for the Spanish speaking population and also very exclusive to the Spanish speaking population and not inclusive to DACA students from Korea and DACA students from, you know, anywhere else who feel have an even more layered and complex identity, undocumented identity or documented identity than Hispanic DACA and undocu students who might feel a certain level of more comfort or privilege in our institutions.
Absolutely. We have a fairly large Polish student body here in Chicago, many undocumented, and they often feel invisible within the undocumented community, which is invisible. So they feel doubly taxed because our focus is often on the Latinx student, the Mexican student, our particular community of origin.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all for that. Catholic social teaching, does it have a particular resonance with your student body, especially with regard to this issue? That is the issue of being a welcoming community for immigrants and or the children of immigrants.
We're waiting for the guy with the collar to jump in first there, Peter.
Well, I'm happy to jump in. And yeah, it does have a very profound resonance with our students. In fact, we've been doing some studies, and 87% of students who matriculate at St. Ed's say that social justice is one of their highest values. So we're attracting students to us because of that particular aspect of Catholic teaching, especially its commitment to social justice and to our understanding of education as transforming the individual so that they can go on and transform society. Going back about, I guess it would be about 20 years ago, campus ministry and student affairs had an initiative to increase understanding of the Catholic identity of the university for staff members, especially who weren't coming from that background. And we had some wonderful presentations by Sister Amada Miller about Catholic social teaching that really, took hold in the imagination of not only our staff, but especially our faculty. They don't always see it as a Catholic thing, but it is. And it's a big reason why people decide to work here.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just piggyback briefly on Father Peter. Likewise, at Cabrini, in our mission statement, commitment to social justice is one of the 3 pillars. And we're a young institution founded in 1957, and we have a large number of alumni who, again, to Father Peter's point, our students and our alums are attracted to Cabrini because of that particular pillar of the commitment to social justice and Catholic social teaching. And then many of them go on to then work in nonprofits all up and down the East Coast, all around, and then abroad as well, around issues of social justice. So that's probably the Singlish that's the most at the heart of our institution. We have another endowed center, the Wolfington Center, that's really our Center for Catholic Social Teaching, how that manifests itself on campus and out in the community. And that center has over 100 partnerships with nonprofits throughout the 4-state Del Valle area. And again, every one of those partnerships is working with a nonprofit in some area of social justice. And so the students are exposed through the core curriculum. We have a set of common integrated courses called Engagements of the Common Good. And they all have a focus, outward focus, largely on issues of social justice in the community.
And I jump in from a totally different perspective and say, it is the framework within which Catholic higher education can lead in this conversation, and has led and will continue to lead. And I think those of us in presidential positions who are often at podiums and often talking about immigration and specifically undocumented students and the like, it provides an understandable value system that you link with your mission that lets you speak out about the larger injustice of where we are with immigration and the specific human rights that are being not denied many of our students at this time. So as a president, it it's Catholic social teaching that gives us license to be more courageous. Not only license, a responsibility to be more publicly courageous around these issues. And having been on this podium for many, many years, I will tell you that even when individuals may have different perspectives on the issue of immigration, I have never found somebody who did not understand why I was so outspoken in the context of our Catholic Dominican mission. And even alums who might disagree with me are silent because they understand that in the context of the social justice mission of the Cincinnati Dominicans, we couldn't speak otherwise. This is who we are, and this is why students come to us and believe in the mission of the institution. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say, being the other president of the panel, Donna nailed it. Same thing. I might get a few letters or calls or emails, about speaking out on various issues. But as Donna said, they're way in the minority, and most who refrain because they understand being present through the Catholic social teaching that's part of, at the heart of the mission. So it does give us that license, but it also, because I have a number of presidential colleague friends that aren't at Catholic institutions who are very reluctant to speak out, and so as Donna said, we tend to speak out a lot on these issues, right? And our communities expect us and want us to do that as well. They want us to lead in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, thank you. We have a few minutes left, and I'd just like to give each of you a chance to kind of give us a closing thought, a takeaway, something you would like us to take away from this conversation today about the mission of your institutions and the need to continue to find ways to fulfill that mission, especially given sort of the fluid circumstances of our day. So maybe I'll begin with you, Donna.
Okay, so I'll go back to the same theme with which I started. I almost dangled that participle there. I would be very upset. I think perspective is important, and one of the things that I'm working on right now is an insight that a faculty member gave to me. And Maria, it's interesting, we're talking about how the racial issues are aligning in one of our other discussions. And it has to do with the core premise of this conference or initiative about integration. I think we really have to rethink our definition of integration, because I think integration in its dictionary definition is about equality in society, and I would challenge that and say that, and this is what this faculty member said to me, it's not about providing room at the table for immigrants. It is about creating a new table. Mm-hmm. And I think we really have to think about it in that way, that we as individuals, the work that we do and the table that we set on our campus has to look and feel different as a consequence of including a new generation of students who bring different cultures and values. And if we can build that new table, and if we go about doing it from the lens of plenty not scarcity. And this article I'm working on, you guys don't steal it. Go through this issue of plenty, not scarcity. Then if you think of it as a 2x2, grid, then the outcome is empowerment. Okay. If you look at it from the lens of, scarcity, so there's a way of really thinking about what we're doing differently in this time where not only students' experiences around intersectionality, but our own experience has to be integrating these points. So that's where I'm thinking more conceptually at the moment, and then wanting to apply it down into our services with the recognition that we empower our students because they are assets that are going to have an impact on changing the world, not because they are needy students or charity cases that need to be propped or fixed up. So new table, sense of plenty, empowerment, assets are my language that I'm playing with in my head right now.
Great, thank you, Donna. Maria?
I love that. The first thing that comes to mind is my responsibility as a young Mexican woman in higher education, and the weight that carries for me, for my family, for my community, and for the students that I have the honor and privilege of working with, and how my own experience, and I guess this is a call to action to my fellow minority professionals out there in the US, for us to take this role seriously in helping pave the way for generations of immigrants to come. And as Donna was saying, in helping create those new tables for us to have a seat in, and to have a say in designing what the table looks like is different, it's new, and I have a lot of, I feel a big sense of responsibility in that. And the other thing I see is an opportunity for universities, because we're small societies, because we're small cities, to be a model for what the bigger society, what the bigger country could look like. We have a chance and an opportunity to create inclusionary societies, to create different tables, to create access, to create employment opportunities, to create academic opportunities, professional opportunities in however way we want that to look like, because we run the rules of this tiny society that we're in. And so that also is a huge responsibility, and something that can help model what other universities could look like, and what our country could look like. So that, I think, is important. And then following up on the last question around how our Catholic identity gives us license to do this work, I think it's also important to remember that our Catholic identity will be used to hold us accountable for what we did or did not do. And so at the end of the day, keeping that question in the back of our minds, because we are Catholic universities, what did we do in 2020, in these times of such great distress?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maria. Don.
Sure. So what I'm thinking about presidential leadership during these times of unbelievable chaos, uncertainty, so many external factors that you really don't have a lot of control over. And living in, the era of social media and how things change hourly, and back to what point Father Peter made earlier, having students from an advocacy standpoint and are so passionate about these topics we've been addressing today, they expect us to lead and have a response literally in 12 hours. from an event, because if you wait, my experience is, and I have president colleagues down the road, who we've had this conversation, and they'll say to me, oh, wow, I got beat up. I waited 3 days to put something out. And then my communications person told me that you had something out like 8 hours after something. They expect that, but what I've been saying here a lot is, given all the uncertainty, financial, all the demographic changes, everything externally in our world, COVID, racial injustice, et cetera, that this is the time that we have to double down on our mission. And this is a time that we center everything and we go back to our mission and everything that we do. Because if not, my sense is there's so much chaos in everyone's lives that it'll unravel if you don't constantly remind and ground yourself in the mission of, this is why, Donna and all 4 of us, we get up every morning loving what we do, going and doing it, is because we're so ingrained in the mission of our work and we believe in it. And that's why we do what we do. In, very difficult roles that we have and incredibly difficult times. Last year I started co-chairing at ACCU, the Aspiring to the Presidency program. And my first remark to the 20 VPs and deans in the room was, I've been president almost 7 years now. My job now is way different and way more difficult than it was in my first, couple of years. And so I think we just have to constantly make sure that we're, using the lens and the filter of the mission for every single thing that we do and every question for it.
Great. Thank you, Don. And just to close us out, Peter.
Sure, and I just want to say a huge amen to Donna, because that was such I can't wait to see that article.
Well, maybe we can write it together, Peter. I'm looking, maybe the 4 of us can write it.
It would be a great joint venture. No,
yeah, I think you and I have just developed a new friendship.
Yeah, for sure. No, I just want to say that, like, all of our students, the students that we're talking about in terms of the children of migrants or migrants themselves, they want the same things. They want to meet their goals, they want to be successful, and they want to have meaningful lives. And that's really the goal of Catholic education in a nutshell. And the added part of it is that Catholic education has always been about doing that and preparing students for meaningful life in a society that often doesn't want to welcome them. And so we have to prepare them, and they well know the challenges that they'll face in the United States as they erupt into it. But there's a phrase that Bob and I know very well from our constitutions that says that we have to have the competence to see and the courage to act. And I think that's important for us as educators, but it's also important to equip our students with that as well.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a great note to end on. I think each one of you represents institutions that have, historically had the competency to see and the courage to act. And I just want to thank you all for your leadership at your institutions and the way you've really done your utmost to serve a population that often is underserved and that's often vulnerable, but as Donna has made clear, bring incredible gifts to us. And so I also love that image of a new table. It's not just welcoming people to our table, but it's a new table, right? Because we're all enriched by the presence of each other. And I think that it means kind of building new communities, right? Building communities that look a bit different than communities of the past. And obviously many people will find that threatening, but I think that your institutions are helping to, and you, each one of you, is helping others to see that it's actually incredibly enriching. And so it gives me reason for hope, and I'm sure it gives others reason for hope as well. So thank you all for this great conversation, and thanks to our participants, our attendees, our conference participants for joining us this afternoon. The next session is actually a plenary panel at 2 o'clock that's going to focus on mainstreaming Catholic teaching with regard to immigrants and refugees. So that's at 2 o'clock Eastern time, so in about 40 minutes from now. So thank you all. Thank you very, very much. Have a great day, and
Thank
hope
you.
to see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.